You spent your whole life sacrificing for others, and then one day you wake up and no one needs you anymore. No more phone calls, no more thank yous, no more place in the very home you once built with your own blood and sweat. Old age doesn't just come with gray hair. It comes with the quiet realization that you've been pushed to the sidelines. And the hardest part is realizing this. You never truly lived for yourself. This video isn't here to comfort you. It's a wake-up call, a slap in the face to snap you out of it. If you're tired of playing the same old roles, if you're starting to ask yourself, what am I even living for now? Then don't look away, because the rest of this video will give you something you've never had your entire life. A damn good reason to finally choose yourself. If you feel the positive energy, don't forget to like this video and share a meaningful comment. There's a strange moment no one warns you about. It's the morning you wake up past 50, look in the mirror, and realize there's nothing in your reflection that truly belongs to you anymore. Family, work, duty, the phone calls, the favors, the social events, everything that once made you feel important has faded into a blur. You lived your whole life for others, carried the weight of responsibility, swallowed every frustration to fulfill the role of father, husband, provider. And then, when your body can no longer carry that weight, you start to hear the silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of being quietly cast aside. No one calls anymore. No one asks for your opinion. No one needs you now. It's not betrayal. It's not cruelty. It's just the brutal law of life. When you're no longer useful, the world closes its doors on you, as if you never existed at all. The question creeps into your mind, first as a passing thought, then as a constant sting. After everything I've given, what's left for me? And the answer, more often than not, is not much. You traded your youth, your health, your time, and your passion in exchange for recognition that may never have been given. You lived exactly how society expected you to, but slowly died inside because you never dared to ask, who am I beyond everyone else's roles? And when old age arrives, the emptiness exposes the truth behind what you once called success. Your bank account might be full, but your soul is hollow. Your family's still around, but you're no longer the center. Your kids love you, but they have lives of their own. Your wife is still by your side, but the connection has long been worn thin by time and responsibility. And you realize you never really lived for yourself. That's the gut punch of aging. Not because your body is weaker, but because you've woken up from the sacrifice story you've told yourself all these years. And if you don't wake up soon, the rest of your life will just be a dragging shadow of the glory days no one remembers. It's not loneliness that kills you in old age. It's the crushing disappointment when the expectations you carried your whole life are never fulfilled. You expected your children to be grateful, your wife to always stand by your side, your friends to remember you, society to recognize your sacrifices. But life doesn't run on what you expect. It runs on its own terms: impermanence, change, indifference. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. It's not love that hurts, it's conditional love. You give and quietly expect something in return. You sacrifice, believing that one day people will come back and repay you. But life doesn't operate like a contract, especially not when there's no document, no clear terms, just a blind belief that human decency will somehow keep things intact. That's an illusion. All relationships change. What touched someone's heart yesterday can be forgotten tomorrow. The people who once promised to stay by your side may turn away when they find something more exciting. It's not malice. It's human nature. Loyalty, kindness, recognition, the things you hold sacred, might be just a passing phase to someone else. The more you expect, the more you'll be let down. The tighter you cling to the image of the devoted father, the irreplaceable husband, the more it'll tear you apart to realize they're doing just fine without you. And then the bitterness creeps in. You start blaming, resenting, feeling life is unfair. But the truth is, no one owes you anything. No one was born to spend a lifetime thanking you. They live for themselves, just like you once lived for them. Don't blame them. Blame yourself for not realizing sooner that every expectation is a rope tying you to pain. If you want peace in old age, you have to untie those ropes, one by one. Not for anyone else, not for show, but so you can finally breathe. Because nothing torments a man more than living in a world where he believes he deserves to be loved, but no one ever returns it. One of the biggest mistakes a grown man can make is believing that love and sacrifice are some kind of investment with guaranteed returns. You love, you protect, you give, and deep down you assume that one day the people around you will come back, embrace you, and say, "Thank you for everything." But then the years go by and you keep waiting for nothing. No thank you, no return, no heartwarming ending like in those cheap family movies. Instead, there's only silence, distance, and sometimes even ingratitude. You start feeling like a fool. But the problem isn't them. The problem is you. Because you lived under the illusion that kindness automatically creates gratitude. It doesn't. Love, if not given to the right person in the right way at the right time, becomes meaningless. And sacrifice, if it doesn't come from inner freedom, but is instead the silent price you pay hoping for validation, will eventually betray you through your own expectations. How many Mr. Hungs and Mrs. Mays are out there? Elderly people who spent their youth caring for spouses and children, abandoning themselves, giving up passions, trading everything for family, and now sit in empty rooms, no calls, no visits. They're not unlucky. They're just victims of a contract that was never signed. Because I gave, I deserve something in return. But the world doesn't run on silent contracts. Everyone lives by their own values. What you give, no matter how much, doesn't obligate anyone to respond the way you want. And if you can't accept that, you'll spend the rest of your life steeped in bitterness and resentment. Awakening only comes when you're brave enough to admit, no one is obligated to be grateful to you. No one is required to love you just because you once loved them. And the sooner you accept this truth, the sooner you'll be free from the most dangerous chain in a man's life, the blind belief in reciprocation. Stop wasting another day living in weakness and chaos. Subscribe to Stoic Success now to build an unbreakable mindset, master your emotions, and face life like a warrior. When you were young, they taught you, give, sacrifice, live for others. And you did. You poured all your energy into playing your part. You carried the weight of every role, father, husband, provider. No one asked if you were tired. No one cared what you had to leave behind. Because this society doesn't care about a man's emotions as long as you're still useful. But then, as you grow old, what do you realize? That what you gave never really comes back. That you spent your entire life on a stage where, by the final act, there's no one left to applaud. And in that moment, if you're not careful, you fall into an emotional black hole, a place where you feel useless, discarded, worthless. But this is the moment to do what you've forgotten your entire life. Reclaim your energy. Not to get revenge, not to curse life, but to finally start living for real. Old age isn't the time to chase people. It's not the time to beg for validation or crave attention. It's the time to look back and say, what's left belongs to me. Don't be afraid to turn inward. Don't fear being called selfish. Because after so many years of living for others, taking care of yourself isn't a luxury. It's an awakening. Remember the little things that once brought you joy, but you've long neglected. An old song, a quiet park bench, a slow cup of coffee. Return to the things that nourish you, not drain you. Say no to pointless phone calls, to unsolicited judgment, to unpaid expectations. Stop explaining. Stop pretending to be strong for someone else. Because you are strong when you dare to stop and come home to yourself. You might be alone, but this is sovereign solitude, not abandonment. And from there you'll see, the time you have left may be short, but if you live it true to your core, it's worth more than all the years you spent chasing someone else's approval. Peace doesn't come from what you do for the world. It comes when you no longer let the world consume you like it used to. At a certain age, you begin to realize that most of what you've ever said in life meant nothing. You spoke to prove yourself, to defend your ego, to convince others you were right. But in the end, those words didn't change anyone, and they didn't make you any happier. They just wore you out. A truly mature man isn't the one who talks the most, but the one who knows when to stay silent. Because the longer you live, the more you understand. Not every argument is worth having. Not every thought is worth voicing. Silence is not surrender. Silence is when you're strong enough to stop needing to prove anything. When you see how useless it is to try and control someone else's emotions with your words. When you know that sometimes a glance, a nod, or simply walking away says it all. In youth, people think speaking up shows strength, but in old age you realize the truth lives in the quiet, in the seconds you choose not to react. In the moments you hold back a bitter reply because you know it won't change a thing except hurt both sides. Some say silence is confusing, even cruel. But the truth is, silence is the final form of power when all others are gone. When you no longer have the energy to argue, the need to prove, or the time to waste on meaningless things, you go silent. And in that silence, you rediscover something you abandoned long ago: peace. You start hearing your own breath. You feel the real rhythm of life, no longer drowned out by the noise of expectations, duties, or fake relationships. And strangely enough, the more silent you become, the more people pay attention. Because in a world where everyone screams to be heard, the one who holds his silence is the one with the most depth in the room. Not everyone gets that. That's why silence is a symbol of wisdom in every major philosophy, from Buddhism to Stoicism. Because it's not running away, it's a choice. And to choose silence, you have to be far stronger than those who can only shout to feel seen. The world doesn't need you to speak more, it just needs you to be still enough not to get swept away anymore. You can't save someone who's choosing to sink. You can't fix someone who isn't ready to change. And you can't carry someone else's pain just because you love them. That's not cruelty, it's truth. But for us, especially men who've been conditioned to be the burden bearer, that truth is hard to accept. You see your children making mistakes and you want to correct them. You see your wife in pain and you want to rescue her. You see your friends falling apart and you want to pull them back up. But after decades of trying, you grow tired, drained, and finally face a simple, painful realization. Not everyone wants to be saved. And if you insist on carrying someone else's burden, the first and only one who suffers will be you. Letting go isn't turning your back. It's recognizing your limits. It's understanding that every person has their own journey, their own lessons, their own timing to awaken. And if you try to force your way into that path, not only will you lose yourself, you might rob them of the chance to grow. We often confuse love with control. We think love means fixing, advising, holding on. But real love sometimes is silence, standing outside the chaos, watching someone you care about fall, and still believing they can rise on their own. That's unconditional love. That's care without control. That's kindness with boundaries. Not because you're selfish, but because you understand that healing doesn't come from the outside. It must rise from within. As you grow older, you'll realize you no longer have the strength or the need to carry everyone else's emotions. And you don't have to. No one assigned you the job of making everyone happy. No one gave you the right to change them. You've lived long enough to know the only thing you can control is your own response. Letting go doesn't make you cold. On the contrary, it keeps your heart from freezing over with disappointment. It gives you the peace to love without demand, to care without control, to be present without imprisoning yourself in the obsession of having to do something. A wise man knows when to speak and when to step back, when to reach out and when to let go, because sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is let people take responsibility for their own lives. Nothing torments a man more than spending his entire life chasing approval. You work hard, not because you love the job, but because you want your boss to acknowledge you. You care for your family, not just out of love, but because you want to be called a good husband, a model father. You live honorably, suppress your own desires, sacrifice your dreams, just to earn a nod of respect from people who may never truly understand who you are. And when they don't give you that recognition, when they don't see what you've done, you break. You feel like you've failed. But the truth is, you didn't fail. You were just playing the wrong game. Because from beginning to end, you lived on borrowed energy, seeking validation, craving to be seen, begging to be accepted. That's a form of spiritual begging no man should carry into old age. The more you beg, the weaker you become. The more you depend on others' approval, the more you lose the power within. And the price of living to please others is that, somewhere along the way, you lose yourself without even realizing it. It's time to ask a blunt question. Do I really need someone else to understand me in order to live as my true self? The answer is no. You don't need anyone to understand. You just need to understand yourself. When you accept who you truly are, your strengths and your scars, your past and your mistakes, you no longer need someone to pat you on the back to feel worthy. And when you stop chasing recognition, you become free. Free from society's invisible strings, free from expectations you never agreed to, free from the mold of a man who's supposed to be this or that for everyone else. Maybe you'll be praised less, maybe you'll no longer be the center of attention, but in return, you'll become the center of your own life. And in this illusion-filled world, that is priceless. The strongest man isn't the one who gets the applause. It's the one who can stand quietly, live by his own code, and smile, even when no one's watching. Because he doesn't need outside light to know he's already shining within. You're well past the halfway point of life. You owe no one anything that requires you to keep living like a shadow. You don't need to keep sacrificing for the sake of keeping the peace. You don't need to bend over backwards just to be called a good person. You don't need anyone's nod to give yourself permission to live as who you truly are. At some point, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say it out loud. I choose me. Not because you're selfish, but because if you don't, the rest of your life will just be a sad repeat of all the years you spent abandoning yourself. Your whole life, you've been programmed to prioritize others. You gave up your hobbies for your kids. You shelved your passions for your wife. You settled for a dull job because it was secure. And you called that responsibility. But when the kids grow up, they live their own lives. When your wife ages, the love no longer feels the same. When the job ends, no one remembers how hard you worked. All that's left is a confused man wondering who he is, if no one needs him anymore. That's the cost of living without choosing yourself. You can't go back. But you can stop now and begin a different kind of life. Freedom doesn't come from someone else allowing it. It comes when you finally refuse to keep playing old roles and start living in your truth. You don't owe anyone an apology for craving peace. You don't have to explain why you no longer want to attend fake social gatherings. You don't need to justify chasing a personal passion that benefits no one but you. You don't need to be understood. You just need to understand yourself. True freedom begins the moment you stop living to impress. When you're brave enough to say no to what no longer fits and yes to what brings you back to life, even if it's just a small joy or a massive shift. From now on, you don't need approval to live meaningfully. You don't need consensus to seek peace. You don't need an audience to write the final chapter of your life. You need one thing, the courage to choose yourself and never ask permission again. And if anyone questions you, you don't owe them an answer. Just smile, turn away, and keep living, like a man who's finally awakened. Old age isn't the end. It's your last chance to live truthfully. If you've spent your whole life trying to please others, then let the rest of it be about honoring yourself. No one's coming to save you. No one owes you a thank you. And no one has the right to stop you from starting over, from within. It's time to stop chasing validation, stop carrying burdens that no longer belong to you, and let go of expectations that have long since rotted. Peace isn't about being loved by others, it's about no longer betraying yourself. Live deeply, live consciously, live honestly, even if only for a few years more. Don't let your last breath come in regret. Let it come in stillness, with a soft smile and these final words. I lived the end of my life without asking permission, and it was the best damn decision I ever made. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.